The Echoes of Edinburgh. The film opens in the grey, mist-shrouded streets of Edinburgh, Scotland, in 1847. We find a young boy, known to his family as Alec, born into a dynasty of elocutionists. His grandfather was a speech specialist. His father, Alexander Melville Bell, was the creator of visible speech, a universal phonetic system designed to help the deaf learn to articulate sounds they could not hear. But for Alec, sound was more than a profession, it was a profound emotional anchor. His mother, Eliza Grace Bell, was nearly deaf. Watching her struggle to hear the world, seeing her press a large ear trumpet to her head or play the piano with a wooden stick held between her teeth to feel the vibrations, left a permanent mark on his soul. Alec would sit close to her, speaking in low, resonant tones against her forehead, believing that the vibrations of his voice would bypass her ears and travel directly to her mind. This was the crucible of his genius, a blend of scientific rigor and deep, empathetic love. By the age of 12, Alec had already invented a dehusking machine for a local mill, but his heart remained in the mechanics of the human throat. He and his brother once attempted to build a speaking automaton, a mechanical head with a movable tongue and vocal cords made of rubber. When they forced air through it and it cried out, "Mama," the neighbors were convinced a ghost had entered the Bell household. The quiet exile and the promise of the new world. Tragedy struck the Bell family with the suddenness of a winter storm. Alec's two brothers died of tuberculosis, and he himself began to fade. Fearing they would lose their last remaining son, the Bells fled the damp air of Scotland for the vast, open plains of Ontario, Canada, in 1870. In the New World, Alec's health returned, and with it, a renewed sense of mission. He moved to Boston, becoming a celebrated teacher for the deaf. It was here that he met the two most important figures of his life, Gardiner Green Hubbard, a wealthy lawyer, and his daughter, Mabel Hubbard. Mabel had lost her hearing to scarlet fever as a child. She was graceful, intelligent, and lived in a world of absolute silence. As Alec taught her to speak, he fell deeply in love. His desire to cure the isolation of deafness was no longer just a tribute to his mother, it was a romantic vow to his future wife. However, he was a man of modest means, a poor teacher competing against the giants of the telegraph industry. To win Mabel's hand, he had to prove he could provide for her. He had to invent the harmonic telegraph and the birth of a voice. The mid-1870s in Boston was a time of frenzied scientific competition. Western Union was the Google of its day, and the telegraph was its king. The goal was the harmonic telegraph, a way to send multiple messages over a single wire using different musical pitches. Alec worked by day as a teacher and by night in a cramped, attic workshop on Court Street. His assistant was Thomas Watson, a skilled mechanic who became the hands to Alec's theoretical mind. While others were trying to send clicks and pulses, Bell had a more radical, almost poetic idea: if I can make a current of electricity vary in intensity, precisely as the air varies in density during the production of sound, I should be able to transmit speech. The struggle was grueling. Money was tight, and Bell was often torn between his devotion to his students and his obsession with the wires. There were nights of despair where the harmonic telegraph seemed like a phantom. Then came March 10, 1876. The air in the lab was heavy with the smell of battery acid and burnt wire. Bell was in one room, Watson in another. Bell accidentally spilled some acid on his clothes and called out, perhaps in a moment of frustration or reflex, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." In the other room, Watson froze. The words hadn't come through the air, they had come through the wire. They were clear. They were human. The silence of history had been broken. The patent war and the shadow of Meucci. Success brought not peace, but a legal firestorm. Just hours after Bell's lawyer filed his patent, another inventor, Elisha Gray, filed a caveat for a similar device. The patent race is still one of the most debated moments in history. Years later, evidence emerged regarding Antonio Meucci, an Italian inventor who had developed a teletrafono decades earlier but lacked the funds to maintain his patent. Bell spent years in courtrooms, defending his legacy against hundreds of lawsuits. While critics portrayed him as a ruthless monopolist, the reality was a man exhausted by the conflict. Bell never viewed himself as a businessman, he was a scientist whose success had turned into a cage of litigation. Despite the controversies, the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately upheld Bell's patent, recognizing that while others had toyed with the idea, Bell was the one who had mastered the physical principles of undulating current. Beyond the telephone, the restless mind. If this were a typical story, it would end with the telephone. But for Bell, the telephone was merely a beginning. He married Mabel, and with his newfound wealth, he created the Volta Laboratory. He was a man possessed by the what if. He invented the photophone, a device that transmitted speech on a beam of light, the true ancestor of modern fiber optics. When President James Garfield was shot in 1881, Bell worked frantically to invent a metal detector to locate the bullet. He developed early versions of the hydrofoil boat, setting world speed records on water. He became obsessed with flight, building massive tetrahedral kites and supporting the development of the Silver Dart airplane. Throughout all this, his heart remained with the deaf. He founded the American Association to promote the teaching of speech to the deaf and remained a close friend and mentor to Helen Keller. Keller later dedicated her autobiography to him, writing that he was the man who brought me out of darkness into light. The final silence and the digital echo. Alexander Graham Bell died in 1922 at his estate, Bainbrig, in Nova Scotia. He was a complex man, a visionary who saw the potential for a global nervous system, yet a man who occasionally looked back with regret at the nuisance his invention had become, famously refusing to have a telephone in his own study. As he was lowered into the ground, every telephone in North America was silenced for 1 minute. The silence he had fought so hard to conquer for his mother and his wife reclaimed him. His legacy, Bell's true genius, was not just in the wires, but in his understanding of the human frequency. He realized that communication is the fundamental right of every person. Today, as we navigate a world of smartphones, 5G, and instant global connection, we are living in the architecture of Bell's dream. He didn't just invent a tool, he invented the way we love, work, and relate to one another across the void. He proved that if you listen closely enough to the silence, you can find the spark that lights up the world.